In this video, we're going to talk about the for each loop with array lists. So this is the array lists with for each loop video. Okay, so what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about how to use a for each loop, in particular with an array list, because this is a very handy feature that Java has, and you may find yourself wanting to use it frequently. You may have even seen it in some of the lab code, but we're going to explicitly cover it in this video. So let's say that we have an array list here, and it's of type string, right? And we call this the base type, just to be clear. This here is the base type. Base type. So if you ever hear me say that, that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the base type of the array list, or the type that we're going to put into this object. All right, so we have the base type, and what we're going to do is we're just going to call this our list. So it's list, and we're going to say equals new, and this is array list again with those brackets, and then with a value, we're just going to instantiate to 10 for the sake of this video. So we're going to instantiate to 10, and now let's say that we had some code in here where we did a nice, we modified the loop in we modified the list in some way. So we added values to list. So let's say we did list.add, and let's say I added a value at 0 and we said it was high. And then let's say we added a value at position 3 and it was hello, right? It doesn't really matter what the values were. We went through, we have values. We have 10 values in the list perhaps. We don't necessarily have to have the list completely filled out, but if we did, it's not going to matter. And if we don't, it's not going to matter either. What's really great about this loop, this for each loop, is we're going to do a for here. And then we don't actually say each, we say the type that we're getting. Right, so this is the base type in our example. And then we're going to say this is I, element I. Right, and then we have a colon and the name of our list. All right, so what this is going to do is that it's going to pull out each element of our array list one by one. So we don't have to loop through it using that traditional for I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. We can actually just straight up do, for everything in this list, we're going to do something to the object. All right, so here we're going to have like a system. For example, we're going to do system.out.println. And we're just going to print out I. All right. In our case, this is a string, so we can print that out pretty easily. If this was a different type of object, you might want to call I.toString to make sure that you're printing it out in the way that is defined in the toString. Right. And you can do brackets. In fact, I had a conversation during the Q&A last week where somebody asked about the Heartbleed virus, or sorry, the Heartbleed bug that came out many years ago at this point, and I brought up the Apple GoTo fail, which was caused by a lack of brackets. All right, a lack of stylistic consistency in the programming. Brackets will save you headaches when you are debugging, so I highly recommend using brackets for every if statement, for every for loop, always. It's a good practice to have. All right, so we have our brackets, we have our code within those brackets. Now, there's some things that you should know not to do. All right, so do not modify the array list size from the loop. Okay, so what that means is to not use the add method. Okay, Because what's going to happen when you do this is going to change how that for loop operates, and it's going to perhaps do some unexpected behavior. So this is a common misstep that I see people doing with these for loops, is that they're going to modify the contents of the array list, and specifically they're going to add a new value or change the objects in that array list, and you really shouldn't do that. This should only be to access and use that information for some purpose, not to modify the list in any particular way. All right, so this for each loop is really, really handy, and is really handy with array lists in particular. You may have seen it in some code, again, already in your labs. Whether or not you actually had to write it, you may have seen it in some of the existing code that we give you. And this is essentially how it works, is again, just pulling out, right? It pulls out values one by one from the array list, all right? And that's the purpose of it, and it's really handy. You'll find a lot of use for it. And Java's not the only language that has a feature like this. Most modern languages are going to have a feature like this, so it's something that you'll want to be on the lookout for in other languages when you get to using them. But in Java, this is what it is, and this is how it works. And you're going to want to be using this in your lab code wherever it makes sense. But remember not to modify the contents of the array list from inside of that loop.